Hi, my name is Glover and welcome to our online service replay here at GraceLife Church. If you have any questions or you want more information, feel free to email us at admin@gracelife.com.au.
Well, I'm going to start off with some images on the screen, and I want to see, this is going to test your perspective, okay? The kids, you can get involved with this as well. I'm going to show you 5 images which might tell you a lot about yourself. I am not a trained or professional psychologist, but I will pretend to be for this exercise just now. Let's see. Some of you may have seen these images before. What is that a picture of? A woman, okay. Yeah, you're about, let's clarify that. There are 2 types of ladies in this picture. There's a young lady and an older lady. Who sees the young lady? Who sees the older lady? Who sees both ladies? Who hasn't got the foggiest idea what lady they're looking at? Yeah, there's either way you look at it, there's a beautiful lady in that picture. Next image, thanks. Okay. There are 2 animals that can be seen in this diagram. What do you see? A duck and a rabbit. Some of you are very intelligent. Oh, there it is, the rabbit. Oh, the Holy Ghost has come on some of you just in that moment. There it is. So you see there's a bunny looking to the right. There it is. Oh, there it is. The penny drops on. Now I see it. And on facing to the left, there's a duckbill. If you haven't seen the duck. Next image. What do we see there? Yeah, okay. Some of you have got it. Who sees the lady? Who sees the man playing the saxophone? Who can't see any of them? Don't put your hand up because people will mock you. Next one, thanks. Okay. How many cows are in this diagram? Do you see the cow in between the cows? Oh. The cow, there's a white cow in the middle there. Do you see the white cow in the middle there? Oh, there it is. Oh. Isn't it interesting that different perspectives affect our impressions and our intake? Have we got one more there? Oh, this is actually a really, this has been used by psychologists as an IQ test. This one's a tricky one, actually. This one, how many sees the butterfly? Okay. Can you see another animal in that diagram? Yell it out if you see it. What was that? Chicken. Okay, if you, this actually is an IQ tester. They use this as a gauge to see, as an IQ tester for 150 plus. You can't see it. You shouldn't have said that out loud, Karina. Okay, if you want to help, here's a tip. If you tilt your head to the right-hand side, it'll access the left part of your brain. And if you close your left eye at the same time, look at you gullible people. That's a picture that my 5-year-old did last month. There's nothing in that except a butterfly. A beautiful butterfly at that too. It was in colour. I just made it in black and white just to make it look like it's half credible. Perspective is everything. JL also just picked up on this. Perspective. What we see. Importantly, in life, a good principle to go by is what you see is what you'll get. If you look hard enough, you'll find. And our perception of things and situations and people tell us a lot about what's going on in the inside as well. I want to take us, if we can, to Numbers chapter 13 and 14. We're going to go through 2 chapters, not going to read through the whole thing, but today 2 chapters, Numbers chapter 13 and 14. And to give you an overview here, The nation of Israel are there with God, and God is looking to give them their promised land. He has already promised them their promised land. He speaks to Moses to send out some spies to check out this land. You'll see that God says, it's yours. I'm giving it to you. It's already a promise. The spies go out. There are a number of spies that go out. But most of the spies in coming back had a report, a perspective that was shared that was negative. It was a bad report. There are a couple that came back that had a good report. Their perspective was very different. They all saw the same thing, but their focus was different. Now that was really important because the report that came back from those spies, as it was shared, greatly affected the rest of the nation of Israel. Be careful what comes out of your mouth, because it influences those that are listening. Let's go Numbers chapter 13. I'll start the reading. At verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." Let's go down to verse 17. Moses sent these men out to spy out the land of Canaan. He said to them, "Go up into the Negeb and go up into the hill country and see." Everyone say see. It's important. See. See what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or if they're weak, whether they're few or if they're many, whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or if they're strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. And here's a command. It's not a request. It says then, be of good courage. Is that a word for you this morning? Be of good courage. Be of good courage. And bring some of the fruit of the land. Now, the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they were sent out, it says. And then it says down in verse 23, they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. They also brought some pomegranates and figs. Oh, yes. I just feel the Holy Ghost all of a sudden as I talk about those fruits. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster that the people of Israel had cut down from there. At the end of 40 days, it's a significant number in the Bible, at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. They came up to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told them, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey. Milk and honey. Not soy milk. I'm sorry if you're lactose intolerant. It was milk. Good milk. Probably cow's milk. Maybe a bit of goat milk too. Nonetheless, a lot of milk and honey. And this is its fruit. Verse 28 says, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong. There's a big however. Your version might say, but. Or however, the people who dwell in the land are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Cellulites, the Vegemites, the Stalactites. They all dwell in the hill country. That's Josh standard version. Cut that out. Okay, all right. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Here's a different but. Verse 30. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed, that's another important word, we seemed. That's from their perspective. We seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. We seemed. How do you seem of yourself? How do you seem of your circumstance? How do you seem about your situation? What is your perspective? Verse 1 says this, the Lord spoke to Moses. That's always a good start when God speaks. That's where it starts. That's where this whole thing begins to unfold. The Lord spoke to Moses, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, for which I am giving to the people of Israel. So the word goes out from Moses. God speaks, God speaks, God speaks. This is important for us. If you're taking notes, write this down. Who you see determines how you see. Every day of the week. Who you see determines how you see. Here, these people, they saw God and they heard His word, and that affected their perspective. Have you been given a word from God that you're just holding on to? Have you forgotten about that word? Has God spoken, declared something to you or over you? Maybe you felt it in your heart. Maybe it was a dream that you were given. Maybe it was a scripture that you've read. Maybe it was in a song, an excerpt from a song that you're just holding on to. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a prophetic word that someone's given you. Have you been given one of those God speak moments? If you know that God has spoken something to you, and if you take that and graft it into your heart, it affects how you see everything else. The spies were sent out. Most of them responded in fear, but some of them responded with faith, and that affected their long-term trajectory. What do you see? What do you see? I went out in the foyer just before, and I rummaged through the bin, and I found a can. You know what I see? Rubbish. I see rubbish. But have a guess what my daughters see? Money la. Money. My car boot is filled with these money, my precious. Get it, Ariel. Money. Perspective. Sitting with Caleb and Joshua. I've got cans all over. You know, we got $50 last week from these cans that my kids are, side of the road. I'll put it in a bag, chuck it in the bag. Dad, have you got any cans for me? Perspective. To me, it's rubbish. To them, they see the value in it. Sometimes I think my kids look at me and all they see is not a person; they see money. I took one of my girls. I won't tell you her name, but she just turned 5. All right. I took her out on a date last Sunday, and as we're getting out to go to the shops, I said, "Hey, darling, you ready to go?" She goes, "Yes, Dad." "Hey, Dad." "Yes, darling." "I hope you brought your wallet." What am I? Perspective. And it's all about what we focus on, and more important, who we focus on. Who we focus on, what we focus on, and who we focus on determines how we see. Do you see God in your life? do you see him at work in your life? When you see crisis, is it just a crisis or can you see Christ? When you see a cross, does that give you a feeling of your God who was stuck in victimhood, or do you see a God who was victorious? In the midst of your struggle, do you focus on the struggle, or do you see his strength in the midst of that struggle? In our inadequacy, do we focus on that, or do we see his all-sufficiency? In our shortcomings, do we focus on our shortcomings, or do we see his perfection? For which he says, my strength works best in your weakness. And so sometimes God will show you something like the scouts that were sent out to see something, a picture of the future as a means to test your faith. God knew what it looked like. God knew that it was theirs. God knew it. It was no surprise to God to bring back this report. This was a test for them. And sometimes God will give you these opportunities in life to test your faith, to sift your faith, that you would strengthen in him, that you would deepen in him. So what has God shown you a picture of? Has he taken you to the edge to have a look? Has he taken you to the edge to have a look out there? And when you see what's out there, do you see, I can not? Or do you see, no, he can through me? I can't help but remember when God spoke to me about taking on the leadership of this church, and my first reaction to him, he spoke in a service to me. I said, no, I don't want to, I can't. And he shut my mouth in that moment. And he showed me that fear was the reason that I'd said no. Fear, 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 fear. Important to note that fear incarcerates, but faith liberates. If you are bound up with fear this morning, a fear of man, a fear of failure, a fear of responsibility, a fear of tomorrow, a fear of death, whatever it is, it will restrict you. It will contain you. It will bind you up. But choose faith. It will propel you. And not faith in and of itself is nothing. Faith is just an anchor. It has nothing of no value, intrinsic value, unless we work out where we're going to place that anchor or place that faith. Place your faith in God. Don't place it in me. Don't place it in your spouse. Don't even place it in a church. Place it in Jesus. Place your faith in Jesus. Faith is a perspective, but faith is also a choice. Faith is a perspective that we have. Faith is seeing as God sees and agreeing with him. That's what it is. It's working with the Spirit, God's precious Spirit, to see and believe as he does. But it's also a choice. We have to choose to live by faith. We have to make that choice. Sometimes it's challenging for those of us that like to dwell in the natural and in the flesh. Be careful of fear, which tries to squash faith. The world is rife with people living in fear. Satan uses fear to exploit you. It's called fear-ploitation. Turn the news on and the enemy is trying to enhance fear in you. That's what he's trying to do. Why? Because fear takes our eyes, takes our focus off him. That's what it does. But faith plants our eyes and our focus on him. And what the enemy wants, he wants your faith. He wants you to not believe and trust in Jesus. He wants you to take your eyes off him. He'll do what he can. Think about crossing over to 2021. Oh, we're in a new year. Yes, it's a new year. Everything from 2020 is behind us. It's there no more. What do you know? It's followed us in like a bad smell. Turn the news on, it looks even worse than what it did last year. If you turn the news on. Here's an encouragement for some of you. Don't watch the news so much. Half of it's a load of codswallop, maybe even more. I was challenged recently to spend less time on the news and more time in the Word. That's a greater reality. I don't need all this propaganda and nonsense feeding myself. The world is discipling me away from Christ. The world is trying to push me away from the ways of Jesus and the kingdom reality. But I need to know what God's saying. And what does he sound like? Well, he sounds like what he wrote. So what did he write? Oh, there is words. Thank you, Lord. Now I know what you sound like. Now I know your reality. Oh, there's no surprises. You're not up there panicking. You're on the throne, cool, calm, and collected. It's all done. You know what's going on. I put my faith in you. I put my faith in who you are. You know, fear is contagious. Have you been around someone and all they do is they're just scared all the time, they're afraid all the time, they're panicking all the time? Sooner or later, it can start to rub off if you're not careful. Be careful who you spend time with. But in the same way, so is faith. Have you been around faith-filled people? They're always praising God. They're thanking God. Oh, but God is able. No, he can do it. It builds you up. It lifts you up, doesn't it? So let's make a decision about being people of faith and not fear. Having a healthy fear of God and not a fear of man. We cannot ultimately dwell in the two places at the same time, of a fear of God and a fear of man. It can't be done. A healthy fear of God draws us to him, but a fear of man repels us from everyone and we want to cower. And so what do? Have faith in God. Deepen your faith in him, your relationship with him. Trust in him. And what happens is your fear of God develops and grows, and we can't help but run to him. God, I love you. If there's any fear that we should consider in a fear of God, the reason why it's a healthy fear of God, because I'm too afraid to be away from him. I love him so much. There is a God and he is so good. And I don't know if you know him yet, but make this year that you have never known him like now. Know him. Deepen yourself in him. Chew this word for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Spend time in the prayer closet. Prioritize serving your brothers and sisters. Give of yourself. Surrender to him and enjoy him like you've never done before. But if you come into this year and you hold on to things, everything we hold on to for ourselves, we're not putting in his hands. And everything we put in his hands, he does better with anyway. So let's make a decision to live in faith. Here's a result of this faith, or this, in other words, belief. Do you believe God or not? Do you believe him for your situation or not? Do you believe him for your healing? Do you believe him for your deliverance? Do you believe him for your freedom? Do you believe him for your future or not? I get it that in the natural it looks a certain way. But we serve a higher reality that discloses a greater reality as we trust him. So, who we see determines how we see. We know that fear incarcerates, but faith liberates. And the final point is what we choose to believe determines what God has us receive. There is a direct correlation between perception and reception. How we perceive and what we receive. This is all about faith. It's all about faith. This is not just a blab it and grab it type of theology where I'm just going to believe for whatever I want. and I'm going to get it. That's not what we're talking about here. Remember, faith is agreeing with God, seeing his perspective. And so when we agree with him and his promises, we put the anchor of faith in him and what he has said. Oh, I can inherit that promise? Yeah. Check out Hebrews chapter 11, the great chapter of faith. What is faith? Faith is the confident assurance that what we hope for is going to happen. It's the evidence of things not yet seen. We know that by faith, God, he framed the whole universe. It was by faith that Abel offered this offering. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven and didn't see death. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed God and left and didn't know where he was going to go, but he just left. By faith he did that, it says in Hebrews 11. It also says in Hebrews 11 that Sarah, his wife, by faith could conceive. By faith. By faith Isaac was offered. By faith. It was by faith. It was by faith that Noah built this ark, remember? That's crazy, but it was by faith. And people believed, and you know what? It was credited to even those that believed and had faith, but didn't fully receive their promises in this lifetime. It was still credited to them. They're just as much heroes of faith as the other ones just mentioned. So it all comes down to whether we believe in God and trust in him or not. What is the report that we're going to believe? Let's read on. In chapter 14, then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night, and all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, "Hey, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness? Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" Oh, jeez, what idiots. And they said to one another, "Let us choose a leader and let's go back to Egypt." All of a sudden, they've got spiritual amnesia. They've forgotten all the good things that God had done for them. They had forgotten everything. And it's not just it happened once. They tell the stories generation to generation. This is how they functioned. The Israelites, they told the story again and again and again and again. So it's part of who they are. And all of a sudden, spiritual amnesia, because of fear, it crippled them. It incarcerated them into an alternate reality. Verse 5, then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. Wow, like the Hulk. Tore his clothes. No, not really. They tore their clothes. When they tear their clothes, that is expressing a deep anguish within them. Because what they wore was of great value. They didn't have massive wardrobes like Gary Baker. They just had a few choice bits of clothing. This meant so much, and they tore their clothes, it says, and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, "The land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land, and he will give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. And do not rebel against the Lord." What do you mean, don't rebel? Don't doubt him. Just trust him. Just trust him. He's spoken to us. He says it's ours. And do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. We're going to eat them for breakfast. I love what faith does. It liberates. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. And they wanted them to get stoned, I guess. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. Moses then goes into a prayer with God, but importantly it says at the end of, toward the end of chapter 14, I'll go from verse 36 to verse 38, thanks. The men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all of the grumble against him by bringing up a bad report about the land. The men who brought up a bad report of the land died by plague before the Lord. Of those men who went to spy out the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. It's a little bit further. It goes on further than that, you know. It wasn't just those that brought the bad report, because they disobeyed. They didn't trust God. It wasn't just them that didn't inherit. It was everyone that believed that lie. Everyone that did not trust God did not go into the full inheritance that God had for them. They didn't see it. They didn't see it. What we choose to believe will determine how God would have us receive. What report will you believe? Many of you last year, in recent months in particular, we've seen healings, signs and wonders. Fantastic. I was thinking this morning of Bill Durham in particular, who Bill was given a bad report just over 18 months ago, having cancer, advanced cancer, and his PSA count. I was with him as we prayed. Every other week we were praying, just agreeing. And the faith of this man, his PSA count, his blood count would go from 4 to 4.6 to 5 to 6 to 7. And he still says, no, I know what God has said to me. And then eventually, after a number of months, it started to come down. Until we hear a couple of months ago, he got a report from the doctor which was different to what they originally gave him. He was healed, set free. How? How does God do that? Because he honors his word. He spoke to Bill and he says, no, I'm taking care of this. And he had to wait a while. Importantly, you know, it took 40 years for them to walk into that land. It didn't happen straight away. It took 40 years. And sometimes God will put a pause. He'll put a delay in place. And that delay as well is also a test of faith. If God gave you everything that you wanted in the moment you wanted it, we wouldn't grow. Our faith wouldn't develop. It wouldn't deepen. It wouldn't mature. We'd become spoiled brats at the end of the day. Hey, God, I want this. Yeah, okay, straight away. It's yours. I'll be a brat. But at times, God wants my faith to endure and to deepen and to ripen and to mature. That's what he does for his kids. His ultimate goal for you and for me is not just a ticket into heaven. It's Christ-likeness. It's maturity. He wants you to grow up. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? He wants you to grow up and become like Jesus. And so he will expose you to things, allow things to happen, that we would cling to him and have faith in him and not succumb to fear in this world. I'm going to finish with Hebrews chapter 3. And verse 19. Actually, I'm going to go New Living Translation, please. So we see that because of their unbelief, they were not able to enter his rest. Talking about this exact situation. Because of their unbelief. It wasn't because they were bad people. It wasn't just because they were naughty. It wasn't because they sometimes told a little curse word now and again, or they stole some cheesels off their family members. It wasn't. It's their unbelief. Let's read in the next chapter. I'm going to go, if I can, verse 9 and to 11, thanks. So there is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. But if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall. What's that talking about? This is New Testament and Old Testament connection right here. We see a foreshadowing of God's reality through Christ. We see it, we read about it in Numbers. We see it brought to the light post-cross in Hebrews. And the writer to the Hebrews is saying, hey, listen, this is what you want to work for. This is what you want to labor for. You don't need to labor or work for your own effort's sake and for your own sense of righteousness. It's no. This is what you want to strive for. Just strive for resting in Jesus. That's it. If there's any work that really matters, it's just resting in Him, trusting in Him, having faith in Him. Looking out at 2021 saying, you know what, I don't exactly know what's going to happen. I don't know what it holds, but I know who holds it. And He is with me, and He is in me. And if I just believe in Him, no matter what the world throws in the direction of God's people, we're at rest. And you are always at your best when you are at rest. Every day of the week. You can be working hard in your life, but you can still have rest in your heart. It's resting in Jesus, having trust in Jesus, believing in Jesus for what He's already done. If He did nothing else, He's done enough. Everything He needed to do was on that cross. Isn't that cool? So my encouragement for us, as was already preluded in prayer this morning, is just to encourage a focus and a perspective on Jesus and the finished work of that cross. He's done it. Trust in Him. It's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Trust in Him. He's all that matters. He's all that matters. Don't get distracted this year. Don't let the enemy distract you. He'll try and distract and disrupt and disturb your heart. That's what he'll try to do. Don't let him have it. He wants it from you. Don't give it to him. He can't take it, but he wants you to give it up. Make a decision. Be intentional and purposeful to be set in Jesus. I see you. I love you. And I know you.